Hello and welcome to A Squirrel Plays. It's me, the Squirrel, and today I'd actually like to talk a little bit about something that is neither video game or Dungeons & Dragons related. It is, however, about character design, which is an important topic around here. Now, I haven't quite decided if it's a horrible idea to start my channel with a video about what is apparently an extremely controversial topic, or if it's actually a brilliant move. Now that said, I am hoping that it will at least show you how things work around here and give you a decent idea on what it's all about. We're here to look at things with an open mind and see what could be done better. It's not supposed to be angry clickbait titles or hate-fueled rage fests where nothing really gets discussed. It's also not supposed to be blind praise either, while turning a blind eye to the obvious shortcomings. It's about taking something and seeing what could be done better with it. That's how we grow. That's how we move forward and advance. We look at our works or the works of others and see what could have been done better. That way on our next work, we will do better. That's how you not only keep yourself sharp, it's how you continue to get sharper. Otherwise, you'll be swinging around a dull sword in no time. Now, unfortunately, most people don't like growth because, well, it tends to hurt. You have to accept that your work has room for more work. Not everybody's willing to accept that. Not only that, some platforms tend to squash out constructive discussion in favor of the popular opinion and either blindly praise something or hate it for no other reason than that's what the cool thing is to do right now. In other words, it's easy to find yourself sitting in an echo chamber and nothing squanders growth better. So with that said, let's have a little chat about Reva from the new Star Wars show from Disney, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, odds are you've probably heard or seen some discussion about her already, and maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, but all I ever seem to see is people talking about why she's a bad character or the controversy itself. Nobody ever seems to stop and say, well, all right, how can we make Reva better? What would have actually made her interesting? Again, I might just be looking in the wrong places, but that's all I'm seeing. And then on the other side of that argument, all I see is people saying, well, she's perfect as she is, and anybody else who thinks otherwise is just a bigot, which is a terrible argument, and that's not what we're going to be doing. All right, so in order to figure out how we can do better, we first need to figure out where we're coming up short, and then we'll go from there. Now, I won't be talking about every single thing wrong with the character. I just want to point out a few different things and go from there. We'll start with the first thing we see, which is her visual, right? Her appearance, what the eyes see when she steps onto the scene. And what we see is, well, it's pretty boring. It's plain. There's nothing really special going on. Now, I'm not saying that she needs some anime protagonist hair, but she definitely needs something to separate her from the others if she's supposed to be an important character. But we don't get anything. She doesn't have a single scar on her. She doesn't have any tattoos, no metal limbs, or nothing. She's not even dressed up any different than the other Inquisitors, which technically is excusable because, you know, uniforms. But still, she's very plain looking as a character. And when standing next to the other two Inquisitors, her plainness really just stands out even more, which might sound contradictory to what I'm saying, but that plain look is never really used for anything. So really it just comes across as a boring character standing next to a pair of more interesting characters. We have our Grand Inquisitor here, and if we don't know anything about Star Wars lore, we can still see some unique things about him. He's got these red stripes on his face, leaving us to wonder, you know, is it war paint or is it tattoos? What do they mean? What's their purpose? You know, more questions that never really get answered in the show. He also has some wicked teeth in there too, as well as weird little things on the side of his head. Now, I'm not saying they have to explain every single little detail, but maybe a little nod towards them here and there would be all right. But regardless, he at least has something different going on with him. And traveling with them is the one I believe they call Fifth Brother, who is also a bit more interesting to look at. Now, I'm fairly certain he's supposed to be an alien, but actually, if you told me he was a human and got messed up by turning dark side, I would believe it. But either way, even if he's just an alien and that's how he looks, or if he was a human and went dark side and that's how he looks now, or shoot, even if he was an alien that looked different, now he looks the way he does because he went dark side. Regardless of the one you pick, at least there's something going on there. He's not just a regular looking human. He's got something that separates him from the rest, even if it is that goofy hat on his head. But anyway, my point here is that Reva has absolutely nothing at all going for her visually. And technically, that is okay, but when you have so many other issues with your character, it just kind of adds to the stack and doesn't work in your favor. So that's the physical appearance out of the way. Now let's have a look at her actual behavior. We're shown in the very first episode, with only a few minutes of her introduction, that she's a problem. She's a problem to the other Inquisitors, and they are extremely tired of her, which raises the question, why is she still here? The Sith definitely aren't above killing problematic followers, we know this. Without looking at anything else Star Wars related other than this show, we even see Vader say if Reva fails, she will suffer greatly. And when she does end up losing Kenobi at one point, Vader starts choking her out. In any other military organization, if you failed to follow orders, or you just straight up disobeyed your superior, you'd be reprimanded, pure and simple. Yet Reva, for some reason, is allowed to constantly disobey orders and go against her superiors. Now, I don't really know exactly how the Sith and Inquisitors fit into the Empire's military ranking. In the real world, you have enlisted and you have officers. So I guess in Star Wars, you have enlisted, officer, and Force users, I guess. Regardless, both the enlisted and the officers seem to respect the presence of the Inquisitors as well as Vader, as if they're part of the military structure, so it's safe to assume there is some kind of structure there that Reva needs to follow. It's not like the Inquisitors are a ragtag group of mercenaries the Empire hired out, so the acceptance of her behavior really doesn't make much sense. Now, on top of that, we're never given a reason why they accept such problematic behavior. Now, what if they were willing to overlook her behavior because she was just really, really, really good with a lightsaber? Then maybe even get to see some unique fighting style we haven't seen in this universe yet. Or what if Vader saw that she was super in touch with the Force and maybe even sought to make her his apprentice one day, and then he ordered the other Inquisitors to deal with her and see how she develops? Or what if she was just really good at hunting and tracking the Jedi? It would be nice if there was something there to make the Inquisitors willing to deal with her problematic behavior. But we're not given any of that. From what we see, she's no better than any other Inquisitor on the team, which again puts her in that extremely average and plain and boring territory. And the sad part is, that's just the first episode. In the second episode, we're shown she's even more problematic somehow, which raises the previous questions even higher. Throughout a mere 6-episode series, we're shown that Reva is angry, violent, disobedient, problematic, willing to kill random people in a bar, cut off a lady's hand, and readily kill what were once her fellow Jedi, capture a child, and attempt to torture said child. Now, just reading off this list of traits alone makes this character sound like a terrific villain. It sounds like somebody who would eventually leave a military organization to go do her own thing, like dominate a planet or something in pursuit of personal power. If I didn't know anything about Star Wars and you showed me this list of traits, as well as this picture, I'd say, well, yeah, I can see that. She seems like somebody that would do that. She's got the crazy eyes. And you know what? If you wanted a villain, I think you'd be in good shape. But the problem is, the show wants us to feel sorry for her because she was one of the many kids that Anakin killed, or at least attempted to, in the prequels. In an attempt to make us feel something for her, the show explains to us that she spent years hunting down the man that killed her friends and fellow Jedi. By hunting down and killing her friends and fellow Jedi so she can get close to him. Now, I can't even begin to unpack just how backwards that is. I mean, honestly, I'm not being hateful at all. I just, honest to goodness, cannot fathom how a group of writers sat in a room discussing this and never saw the issues with the logic. That's what makes me think some orders came from the top that tied their hands, but I reckon we'll never really know on the outside. Regardless, her goal does make sense. Kill the man that killed her fellow younglings and Jedi and attempted to kill her too. That's more than enough motivation for a character to get started, but her way of going about it is just backwards. So now that we've torn it down some, let's see how we can build it back up into something stronger and more interesting. Let's start with the first thing we talked about, and that was her visual, her look, her style, her appearance. What could we have done differently to make that more interesting? If we're keeping the idea that she was a youngling during the whole Order 66 bit, we can use that to our advantage. We can actually get two birds with one stone here. Instead of Anakin poking her with a lightsaber, one of the clone troopers could have done the dirty work for him. We saw them in Reva's flashback in episode 5, so we know some were there. There could have been a room full of younglings and a clone trooper tossed in some kind of grenade that incinerated the younglings or just exploded. Actually, this will get 3 birds with 1 stone. Just hear me out for a minute. The first thing would be surviving the grenade blast is a lot more believable than getting a lightsaber through your tiny child torso. Several of the other younglings could have been, in the way of the blast and taken most of it for her, whether they wanted to or not. And the second thing is she still gets messed up by the blast, giving her plenty of marks to define her appearance. Now, these marks would be a messed up face, or she could have been wounded so bad that she required several robotic and mechanical limbs and components to heal and function again. And then the third thing is, as she lays among the dead younglings, she looks up with just barely enough life in her to see Anakin standing in the hallway with the clone troopers. You could even frame this in such a way that she initially thought Anakin was coming to help her. Then she sees him striking down another kid and realizes he's the bad guy too. So the things we fixed are, 1, her survivability now makes more sense, and 2, she gets some scars and distinguishing character marks made, and 3, she gets to see Anakin be the villain and turn dark side, without being spotted herself. So getting back to the point, which was just to change her physical appearance, now we have a reason for her to stand out. Maybe she has a mechanical arm now, or half of her face is mechanical, maybe a leg or 2, I don't know, or heck, you could even do all of the above. You could have her be all kinds of messed up from the blast and then rebuild after being saved by someone. The more rebuilding you have to do on her, the more of a parallel you could make between her and Vader if you wanted to go that route. Just please don't make her look like the goons from Boba Fett. Alright, so with the look down, let's figure out what we can do with the character. Let's start with the beginning. Let's say somebody rescued her after the incident. There was no her being superhuman and walking away from a lightsaber stab all on her own, or even the grenade blast, if that's the route we want to go. Somebody actually came through after the fact looking for survivors. Or maybe somebody came through trying to save themselves and just happened to notice her on a pile of dead bodies barely moving. You could even say another group of younglings managed to hide and not get caught, and then on their way out, they found Reva. Regardless, at some point, they will need to find some adults for proper medical care. Also, as a side note, if your scene from before ran in such a way that Reva never saw Anakin, you could add something in here with the adults taking care of her to give her that information. Once she's patched up, she could start inquiring about what happened. Somehow, some way, the adults could have access to that video recording showing Anakin slaughtering the younglings, as well as the one where he was kneeling before Palpatine and being called Vader. Now, we would have a good reason for her to know that Anakin equals Darth Vader. Once she's taken out and cared for, and whether it's just her or it's her and her small group of other younglings, she no longer has a master to teach her. This means she grows up without proper training in the Force. And since she's fueled by revenge, she's most likely not going to let that stop her. She wants some justice for what was done that day, so she sets out to learn the Force all on her own. And since her motivation is a little bit hate-filled, even if we as the audience feel it's totally justified, coupled with the fact she is masterless, Reva will now constantly bounce between both light side and dark side of the Force, as well as probably the moral decisions she has to make every day. She wouldn't be an outright villain or an outright hero. She would constantly dance the line between the two as she tried to find her way. And now we have a decision to make. What road does Reva choose to go down? Does she choose the path they had intended for her by becoming an Inquisitor and getting close to Vader? Or does she learn about the Inquisitors and instead becomes an Inquisitor hunter, getting revenge one Inquisitor at a time? Let's look at these paths one at a time and see what we can make along the way. Let's say path 1 is where she decides to become an Inquisitor solely to get closer to Vader so she can kill him. We've already stated that it makes no sense for her to go around killing her fellow younglings and Jedi, considering she wants to, get some justice for her fellow dead younglings and Jedi. So what can we do? We can say she sabotages the Jedi hunts she takes part of. She gets to the Jedis first, and she sets them free before the other Inquisitors get there. Now, of course, this is only going to work so many times, but that's a good thing. That gives Reva a problem to overcome. Now we ask ourselves, what happens? Does she start killing fellow Inquisitors so they can't report back? When she reports in, she claims that there were more Jedi than expected and her fellow Inquisitors were overrun. Does she blame it on a single Jedi, saying one was more powerful than anything she had ever seen before? And this is where you could even add something in about Obi-Wan if you wanted. Instead of hating him for whatever reason she could actually look up to him and use him as a smokescreen. Now, it's no secret Obi-Wan was a heck of a Jedi during the Clone Wars, and nobody knows that better than Vader, so she could say Obi-Wan was there, and he tore through the Inquisitors like they were nothing. Now, again, any excuse she uses is only going to work so many times before somebody starts putting things together. But before we come to that crossroad, let's look at one more thing this may or may not give us. If she manages to convince the others that the hunt she goes on keeps turning sour, yet she's the one to keep walking away, she's going to make a name for herself. Other Inquisitors are going to start thinking she's extremely bad luck. Or maybe rumors start going around that she's got way more skill than she lets on, and that's why she's the only one that keeps surviving. If we're following Reva's story, this would let us see deeper into the other Inquisitors other than them just being bad villain dressed in black because evil. When they're all back at base training or doing whatever it is Inquisitors do in their downtime, we could see them corner Reva personally and start asking questions about what really goes on during those hunts. We could see their doubt, their distrust, and heaven forbid we might even see one get upset that one of the people Reva killed secretly was one of their friends. This would give her pause and force her to think about what she's doing. Yes, Inquisitors are bad now, but they were once Jedi. Also, what if she could turn them back to something good? What if she killed an Inquisitor that was actually thinking about returning to the light side? Or what if she even recognized one of the Inquisitors as a youngling that survives the attack, but they don't recognize her because her face is all messed up with mechanical components, but she knows the truth, and she has to watch them just fall farther and farther and farther into the dark side. This would cause some inner conflict, and who doesn't like a little bit of that in her character? Anyway, let's assume she keeps on pushing forward, increasing suspicions around her. We can say she killed the friend of a fellow Inquisitor, and now he is paranoid about her and constantly accusing her of some foul play. Then we go on another hunt, and this Inquisitor makes sure to put Reva on the spot. They get a Jedi captured, and he puts Reva in such a situation that she has no choice but to strike the Jedi down right in front of him. Now this is where it gets interesting. If Reva had been setting a bunch of Jedi free, then the Jedi no doubt know of her. We could say this captured Jedi knows who she is and has maybe even worked with her a bit prior, helping more Jedi escape. This guy knows that in order for her to keep her cover and save more Jedi, he has to die. So while he's on his knees in front of her, he makes eye contact with her and gives her a slight nod, accepting his fate, and regretfully, she kills him. She knows it was all to save more Jedi, but after striking him down, she begins to question herself on whether or not she's any different than those around her. Now let's fast forward a bit. Let's say she's managed to keep the charade up long enough to get closer to Vader. However, over time, she started leaning more and more towards the dark side. She's become extremely skilled with a lightsaber, as well as the Force, due to dancing on both sides of the fence, but now she started to slip due to the amount of conflict and anger inside of her. But we've made it. She's gotten to Vader, and it's time to bring him down. They have their duel, and she might even be able to give Vader a run for his money, but not too much, because remember, she was a masterless Jedi, and Vader is, well, he's Vader. It's kind of a big deal. As she starts to lose the battle, she could receive a wound of some sort, such as the chopping of a hand, as things tend to go in the Star Wars universe. Beneath the wound, we see the machine parts. Now remember, she had to be rebuilt due to the incident. Maybe over the years, she received even more machine parts from more wounds, becoming more and more like the person in front of her that she wants to destroy. At this point, she can realize she has pretty much become a copy of Vader. She's fueled by rage and half woman, half machine. If she manages to get a wound on Vader, it could also expose the machine bits underneath him, making her realize just what she's become. At this point, the battle is lost for Reva. Vader may even see her potential and offer a position as his apprentice. Though I'll be honest, I get really confused as how that whole two Sith thing works, but I'm pretty sure Vader tried to get Luke to join the dark side in OT, so maybe you can have an apprentice? Don't know. So if that's a possibility that doesn't break the lore, it'd be a great option. She could then say no, making her transition into the light side, and of course, ultimately dying because Vader has to stick around, all things considered. And if the apprentice approach does break Star Wars lore, then your other option would be for Vader to try and break her mentally before killing her off by getting her to believe she's a dark side individual like him, and her actions are no different. Reva then has to overcome mentally and decide that she's good and her actions were just only to get cut down seconds later. It'd be a sad ending, but you know, that's just the way it goes sometimes. The good guys don't always win, and sometimes the good guys aren't even that good morally. But we know it's not impossible to make a good story where we already know the bad guy wins. Just look at the last season of Clone Wars. Now, I know the show definitely had a lot of issues in it, just like any other Star Wars show does, but that finale hit like a truck, despite you already knowing what would happen. Honestly, sometimes it's kind of hard to believe that's a kid's show. But anyway, let's look at option 2. With option 2, Reva never becomes an Inquisitor. Instead, she becomes the Inquisitor Hunter. This would open the door for a lot of fun options, in my opinion. She's not bound to Inquisitor-style equipment, dark side force abilities, or light side force abilities. She's totally free to dance around as she pleases and use whatever means she feels necessary to get the job done. She also wasn't trained or brought up on either side, so her combat style is hers and hers alone. Now, does she wield a saber and a blaster at the same time? Does she use sabers in ways that we've never seen before because she's lacking in force abilities, and which results in a lot of strange and tricky swordplay? Or is she super in tune with the force but terrible with a lightsaber? Does she use those force abilities to become a precision sniper and uses stealth to her advantage? Does she use her robotic components purely for Inquisitor hunting, meaning she's a walking weapon? You're basically completely free to do whatever you want at this point. You've removed your restrictions and you're free to make a character that the likes of Star Wars has never really seen before. The writers could break from the mold that keeps getting used over and over and over and over again every single time Jedis and Siths are brought into the story. Now, how cool would it be to have a scene where a group of 3 Inquisitors go out on a hunt? The first 2 get dealt with relatively easily, and then the third one is trying to escape. It's dark, his allies are dead, and there's a mile between him and safety. Reva is lurking around in the dark somewhere, and he knows it. This Inquisitor is scared. You could even have the whole Predator type of scene going on for that episode, right? She's just picking them off one by one. I don't know, man. I feel like there was a lot of missed opportunity there. They could have made an entire show out of Reva, but instead, they brought in a character that everybody already knows and tried to get her to ride on his coattails. And that brings me to the end of the video. Now, we only talked about a handful of ideas here, but just those couple ideas could have put Reva in so much of a stronger and better position. If we explore those ideas even farther, we'd probably find even more to build her up with. But unfortunately, Disney didn't want to do that, and instead, they went with the character that we have today. And that's kind of sad because it would have been pretty easy to make her a strong enough character to stand on her own 2 feet and have her own show. Star Wars needs new characters, and it needs them desperately. There was no need for an Obi-Wan show. Kenobi was just supposed to be chilling on Tatooine watching over Luke. That's it. He wasn't supposed to go on any adventures or anything. His adventuring days were over. Now, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if Disney went on to try and make a show about Reva anyway. But in order for that to work in any kind of way, I feel like they'd have to retcon just about everything about her. That, or point out the absolute insanity of her revenge plan and try to grow from there. But even then, I don't know how they'd make that work. They put themselves in a really bad spot if they're wanting a Reva show. But like I said, I'm more than certain that that won't stop them. Before we close out, I would like to remind you good people that this is not the actress's fault. She did the best she could with what she was given. We're not here to talk about acting skills. We're here to talk about the character. And to my knowledge, the actor has very little or nothing at all to do with that. I would say it's the writer's fault, but as mentioned before, they might be in the same boat as the actor. In a corporate entity such as Disney, you're not exactly free to write whatever you like. You have rules to follow. You have objectives to check off. So the blame probably falls on somebody a little bit higher up than the writer. But still, I think they could have done a better job unless the rules were so strict that the script was pretty much already written in stone. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Please share yours in the comments below. But remember, do be kind because the internet ocean is salty enough as it is.